Tour de France. Le Mans' teammate, once his friend, Bernard Hinault, is now the American's worst nightmare. The man who owns them both, with his hand firmly on the throttle of a team ready to explode. An angry young man from America has grabbed hold of a race that will not let him go. This is a race that has for 83 years brought the world's very best to meet the test of the Tour de France. Dressed in yellow for the first time in history, an American carries cycling's prized possession on his back. Greg LeMond has arrived and is beating the Europeans at their game. But riding in his way is a man who had pledged to help him win his first tour. Five-time winner Bernard Hinault has let it be known he is off in search of a record 6th victory. Since it all began July 4th, their journey has taken them all over France's most beautiful countryside. 2,525 miles for 24 days. Riders, the largest field in history, and always at the front, the two men who have shaped the race with their own private battle. Bernard Hinault and Greg LeMond have taken aim at one another in this high-speed war on bicycles. It's the Frenchman and the American who have turned this race to catch them into a tangled mess of bodies and bikes. Today, they crown the champion of the Tour de France. And welcome to the Tour de France bike race. In a little while, this great race will make its finish right here along Europe's most glamorous avenue, the Champs-Élysées. And Phil, it began 23 days ago, and through it all, it really has been a battle between the Frenchman and the American, Hinault and LeMond.
Johnny, most certainly has. If you can remember, over 3 weeks ago, 210 riders, a record field, set out. Today, almost 40% of those riders have given up. But all the time, the two principal players have been Greg LeMond and Bernard Hinault. And if you can cast your mind back a year ago, that was where the rivalry and the battle really began, in the mountains of France 12 months back. And this has been one of the greatest Tour de France's because of two of the world's greatest cyclists.
And one of them lives in Quessoy, France, in the heart of Brittany. Home for Bernard Hinault and his family. That is when Papa isn't off winning the world's most prestigious bike race.
Just like that.
Kortrijk, Belgium. Home for American Greg LeMond and his family, who have moved from Nevada so LeMond can train and race in Europe with the best. These are two men as different as red and white. Hinault relaxes in his wine cellar, firmly ensconced in the land of his ancestors. LeMond makes his life as an expatriate American, longing to return his family to the shores of America, but committed to a European sport that insists he raise his family here in Europe. The face of the Badger. It was a name given to Hinault years ago for his tenacity. Beware, American. The Badger is quiet only at home.
The two family men soon faced their reality when the Tour set off from the Paris suburbs on July the 4th. A record entry of 210 riders made their way due north towards the coastline of Calais and the nearest point to England. And even on these opening flat stages, Hinault was never content to watch. He always felt the urge to attack. There were two reasons. The route was heading towards his home in Brittany, and he wanted to tire the specialist climbers over the roads they hated the most. Greg LeMond knew he had to stay close to his friend, or was it a rival, right from the start? And at this early stage, LeMond wasn't sure of Hinault's intention. The opening week of the 2,500 miles race followed the northern coastline through Normandy, where Americans have come before on less happy occasion. Then the route plunged south through the vineyards. A Unable to conceal it any longer, Hinault was receiving treatment for an eye infection caused by the dust of the countryside. Would it hinder his performance? His rivals would soon know. Le Monde was also ill with diarrhea, and he'd need to be in top condition if he was to conquer the mountains that were coming closer with every pedal turn. And as the race went on through the vineyards and Bayonne, the Pyrenees were in sight. The race was about to begin. And Hinault, in company with Spain's Pedro Delgado, entered the Pyrenees with the intention of breaking everyone's spirit. On the road to Pau, he led by 3 miles. On this first day in the mountains, Le Monde was already confused like everyone else, but he didn't know what Hinault was planning. In Pau, Hinault was the leader by a massive 5.5 minutes. Was the race already over? Le Monde's face distraught as this attack by Hinault had not been expected. Was Hinault a teammate or a rival? But the very next day, Le Monde took back 4 of the 5 minutes, the impossible achieved. After the Pyrenees, the race moved on towards the Alps and the next battleground between 2 men who both wanted to win the race. Both appeared equal. But on the very first day, exactly a week ago, Greg LeMond vented his fury on a man who has forced him to prove he is the best. LeMond was drawn by the thought of a yellow jersey. And suffering visibly, the badger was being forced back into his corner. At last, history was made. After 83 years of the Tour de France, an American is dressed in yellow. And LeMond had recovered 8 minutes in less than a week from Hinault to do it.
And so it was last Sunday that Greg LeMond stood in the yellow jersey. But still, one more week of racing remaining through the Alps and a crucial time trial. We'll be back with more of our coverage of the Tour de France in a moment. This is Greg LeMond behind him, and on the left, the boss. His name is Bernard Tapie, and he is the man responsible for the La Vie Claire Dream Team of cycling, which, by the way, cost $3 million to run this year. La Vie Claire, the clean life, the name given Tapie's chain of health food stores. In a society where white bread, wine, and sauces extraordinaire dominate the dinner table, Tapie's investment in the health food enterprise was a bold one. But then so were the investments in the other 44 companies he owns. So why not write a book about it all? Winning the news at night. This is the Lee Iacocca of France, if you will, and the guy is everywhere. Just look out your window. Especially during the Tour de France. When Tapie shows up, you can forget Hinault and LeMond. These folks want a piece of the guy who's bought them both. It was Tapie who brought LeMond and Hinault together. What a perfect match. The talented young American and the legendary Frenchman. Last year, Tapie's Franco-American cycling tandem had the press in a photo-opportunistic frenzy. Smiles all around, most of the time anyway. Here at the Tour, France's Lee Iacocca becomes cycling's George Steinbrenner, master of the bike racing universe. Planning, scrutinizing, orchestrating. Nothing escapes Tapie's glance. And no one misses a chance to watch the man who has done much to shape the modern-day Tour de France with his partner par excellence, Bernard Hinault. Involved? Yes, the boss gets involved. And in the cycling world, that means sticking your head out of a moving vehicle to shout at your coach. It's the powerful Tapie who prides himself on putting together this French team led by Bernard Hinault. For in the minds of the French, Hinault will always be #1, no matter who rides on his team. And where has that left Greg LeMond?
If I want to be frank, I probably should have never come on La Vie Claire because I feel I'm too close to Bernard Hinault, too close to his strength, that I end up always having to take the second position, and it's my fault.
Well, during the Tour, Tapie was asked on the news if it wouldn't be better for LeMond to win the Tour so Tapie could get added business exposure in the States.
Hinault est beaucoup plus connu que Greg LeMond aux États-Unis. Par conséquent, ça serait mieux pour nous sur le marché américain si c'était Hinault qui gagnait.
It would be better for our American market if Hinault wins. Well, the time for arguments is over. Here in the Alps, there will soon be enough more important questions answered in the Tour de France. It's day 18 and time for the race to Alpe d'Huez. Bernard Tapie is on hand. It's clear that if Bernard Hinault is going to make his move on LeMond, it will have to come here. Hinault has two choices: attack Greg LeMond or help him keep his yellow jersey. The American has spent his first full night in the yellow jersey, and he would like some team support.
I'm hoping that I'll have some support from him and in the coming days, because I feel like in the mountaintop finishes I'm riding stronger than he is, and I think I should maybe take another minute out of him today. I'm thinking that.
Actually, the man in second place to LeMond in the overall standings is Switzerland's Urs Zimmermann. Zimmermann is 2.5 minutes behind Greg, and Hinault is another 20 seconds back. Another of the top riders is Spain's Pedro Delgado, but the pace of the favorites has put him fully 8 minutes behind. Check-in time for this crucial trip into the Alps. And for the first time ever, the man to beat is an American.
After the opening day in the Alps, LeMond has the yellow jersey. But it's now Urs Zimmermann who is second and Hinault back in third. Day 2 in the Alps is the most unkind of all, with 3 of the highest passes. The Col de Galibier at 8,600 feet, the highest road in France. Then the road snakes its way up the Col de la Croix de Fer, another brute at 6,800 feet. And after only a brief rest before the final twisting agony of Alpe d'Huez, a mere 5,800 feet. But on the glaciers here, you can ski all summer. Packed together, the field head off into the belly of the Alps, not knowing what the day will bring. For LeMond, it will be his first test in yellow, and now his attention swings to the Swiss champion Zimmermann, just over 2 minutes back in second place. Zimmermann is now the biggest threat to the yellow jersey, but not far behind lurks the Badger. Is he thinking while he rides he can profit from the attention paid the other two? If they watch each other, perhaps Hinault will be able to slip away unnoticed. The mountains will hold the answers to these questions, and the spectators wait for the secrets to unfold. As the air gets thinner and the roads go higher, Hinault is still a force, and with typical panache, he teases LeMond to take the lead. The mountains are a great leveler, but Hinault signaled to LeMond that he won't be content to ride in this pack much longer. Bernard Hinault is like a time bomb ticking. The man who has won this race 5 times. The only question now is when is he set to go off?
High-speed descent in the Alps. Coming into the race, Zimmermann was 2:24 behind LeMond and displays his unusual technique for playing catch-up. The climbers have now become daredevils, and the pace of the race has been dictated by how much risk one is willing to take. Strung out over miles, the pack of 143 takes on the look of a giant pinball machine run wild. Only rock walls and perilous cliffs, barely negotiable at 60 miles an hour. Off the front of it all, Bernard Hinault. Zimmermann in front of him, and manning the lead position, the yellow jersey, Greg LeMond, whose lust for greater speed has ensured him his position as the race leader. But at the bottom of the hill, the group collects itself, and the race begins all over again.
And while Greg LeMond rides close to Urs Zimmermann, the bomb explodes, and Bernard Hinault launches into the attack. Peddling a gear that many riders would use going only downhill, the Frenchman shows his real strength. It's left to Zimmermann to chase, but will LeMond help? And with the rhythm of a metronome, Hinault pushes home an attack he's clearly planned all day. perfect teammate and rides behind Zimmerman. But what's he thinking? Surely he remembers the road to Po a week ago when Hinault won the day by over 5 minutes. That margin now will cost Le Mans the Tour. Zimmerman is now sandwiched between two teammates. The Swiss rider is in isolation and tiring. While Hinault speeds ahead, Le Mans takes advice from his team car. And despite Hinault's attack, Le Mans seems strangely tranquil. Hinault, free again from the field, rides like the wind. His immediate ambition now is to gain time, and lots of it. And with the ski station of Alpe d'Huez on the snow line, who says he won't? Zimmerman is now too tired, and Hinault's gained enough time to take second place. His next target will be the yellow jersey of Greg LeMond. And do you think Greg doesn't know that? Taking food on the move, the break is made, and Hinault settles into his rhythm. But a glance over his shoulder, and Greg LeMond is no longer with Zimmerman, but stimulated by the most coveted symbol in France. He joins Hinault on the attack, helped by his Canadian friend, Steve Bauer. On the hardest day in the Tour de France, 3 members of the La Vie-Claire team have formed at the front, and both Hinault and LeMond are again playing the leading roles in one of the finest races for years. The route continues to wind its way over the Alpine peaks. This is a day for the strongest. And on the slopes of the Col de la Croix de Fer, the rocks blossom with people witnessing one of the finest battles between the world's 2 greatest riders. Swept aside by a private feud, Zimmerman knows dreams of being the first Swiss winner in 35 years are gone. While Bernard Hinault and Greg LeMond have proved beyond all doubt that they have no equals in this race. But the question now, neither of them yet know the answer to, is which one will be first to Paris. The climb of Alpe d'Huez is still to come, and it may yet hold the answer. With a 4-minute gap already open today, these 2 men no longer have any other competition except each other.
Greg LeMond and Bernard Hinault, one unable to beat the other on the climb to Alpe d'Huez. They now choose to ride as one. Alone together in an arena that all at once engulfs them while not obscuring their superhuman strength. The roaring gauntlet greets these men, each of whom wants to win the Tour de France. But neither can do it alone. It was 1 year ago when LeMond helped Hinault win his 5th Tour. And later, LeMond, who burst into tears after realizing his unselfish act cost him a chance at winning the Tour de France. And it was a bruised and broken Bernard Hinault who, after having his yellow jersey saved by the American, pledged to help him, to be his willing team ally in this year's race. Today, here in the Alps, alone together, Hinault and LeMond had a yellow jersey between them, but this time, it was Greg's. And maybe it was gratitude, maybe a newfound friendship that carried the 2 across the mountaintop finish line, arms raised after obliterating the rest of the competition. Hinault received the official stage win, but it didn't matter because LeMond retained the yellow leader's jersey. No one knew quite what to make of what had happened on the way to Alpe d'Huez. But one thing was certain. Bernard Hinault was now the one and only challenge to the yellow jersey. The standings after 18 days looked like this. Hinault 245 back. LeMond's teammate behind him. Reason enough for Greg to be pleased before the next race. That was not the case.
I worry about it. I tell you, I'm very paranoid. And, I tell you, I've had sleepless nights the last couple of nights. I'm praying that everything goes well. It's sad that I'm winning my first Tour de France, and if I was any other rider, not an American, it wouldn't even be a question I'd win. Because there's still a question.
LeMond's paranoia not unfounded. The morning headlines. Hinault declares the Tour is not over. The American presence along the roads at this year's Tour de France has been considerable. And for many reasons, there has been cause to celebrate the red, white, and blue. The first American to wear the yellow jersey, Greg LeMond, has lit up the sports pages back home. But LeMond's fame has come while riding on Bernard Hinault's French team. Both LeMond and his teammate Andy Hampsten signed on with the team, and up until now, that was the only way for an American rider to make a mark in this sport. And it's been tough on Hampsten, LeMond, and other Americans who have had to move their lives to Europe in order to keep up with the very best. But this year, that has changed. There is light at the end of the tunnel when looking toward the future of Americans racing in the Tour. The American 7-Eleven team has made its mark this year, if at times struggling in the effort to do so. They wear the uniforms of professional bike racers in cycling's greatest race. But 1 month ago, they were just a bunch of kids training in Boulder, Colorado.
Party was over last night, man. You got a beer left over? Yeah.
This is not your everyday Tour de France cycling team headquarters, but whatever works.
Hey, Bob, turn up the music, man.
The 7-Eleven America was a bold step for the boys from the States. And even before the tour began, riders like former CBS commentator Eric Heiden knew very well what was ahead.
Last year I got to work with you guys in following the tour, and I was scared after seeing the tour and knowing that we might ride it the following year.
It's intimidating, you know. I mean, you hear about how hard it is and all that stuff, but we'll find out. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit scary.
To tell you the truth, I am a little scared.
Playing in the Super Bowl, pitching in the World Series. Well, it's what they were training for while out here in Boulder this June. Eric Heiden, already an Olympic champion, now joined ranks for this new expedition. And Alex Steeda, the only Canadian on the team, what were in his dreams as he trained in Boulder? Did he know that 1 month later, here in France, he would be leading the world's elite out on a solo breakaway, and that his outrageous move would catch them all by surprise and make him the first North American to wear the yellow jersey? No, it was no dream. 7-Eleven was out to get noticed. But good grief, one of their men leading the Tour de France. It built a lot of confidence all around.
We're going to do the best job we can to hold that jersey as long as we can. Just want to say hi to everyone in Vancouver, and hope they keep watching, because there's going to be more to come.
We're cavemen, what can I say? We're bad to the bone. At least the first day. We'll see the rest of the race how it goes.
If life seems almost livable in your first Tour de France, stick around. Things have a way of falling apart rather quickly. And the Americans' trouble began in the team time trial. Yellow jersey Alex Steeda. A few hours in the Golden Fleece feels good, but it's a fickle prize indeed. Steeda lost the jersey and was almost disqualified for falling too far behind. It wasn't that 7-Eleven was worse off than any other team. It's just that the first time can be the worst time. When the race hit the mountains, Olympic champion Alexei Greywall spent time at the front of the pack with the leaders, while his compatriots Chris Carmichael on the left and Doug Shapiro on the right suffered on the climbs with stomach viruses and eventually had to abandon the race. Even Greywall, who had stayed near the front, had enough of the race and those around trying to record it. Greywall was trying to finish each day's ordeal with a case of bronchitis, and it finally was just too painful. Chased and haunted by the ghoulish broom wagon that threatened to scoop him up, Alexei Greywall finally gave in and gave up on finishing the Tour de France.
I feel pretty confident about making it to the finish, and if I can do that, that'd be my biggest goal, making it to the finish and seeing the Champs-Élysées a couple times going up and down there.
Well, you know, it's always a matter of, just 5 more kilometers, you know, or just 10 more kilometers, or just to the next speed zone. And it's always little things, little games you play, and then, it's only 50 kilometers to go. So yesterday, I definitely was cracking on the second hill. I mean, I was just starting to die. And all you do is you just hope you can hang on.
You swear to God you can't make it to the top, but somehow you keep struggling over, and it's just one of those things where you got to survive. And the hills are really steep.
For Eric Heiden, the Tour continued in the Alps at the back of the pack, but only with the help of those who refused to let the mountain beat him. Heiden was faltering badly, and like a relay team, they passed him along, one to the other. The Olympic speed skating champion, who had gone far beyond the limits set for mere mortals, totally dominating a sport and winning 5 gold medals. The 28-year-old need not prove himself to anyone. But for Heiden, there was one last goal to accomplish before starting yet another life as a medical student. Heiden sought an honor reserved for the world's elites, finishing the Tour de France. Here in the Pyrenees, he had survived another impossible day in the mountains. Heiden, one step closer.
To finish the Tour de France is something that I'll try as hard as I can to do. And, you know, it's one of those things where years down the road, you know, you can sit down with your grandkids or your children and say, you know, I was in that race, you know, the race of races.
The race of races, the race of a lifetime. For Eric Heiden and his teammate Davis Phinney, the race had only just begun. The climbs were getting steeper and the days longer. The crowds that had roared for the leaders now offered polite applause for the men in a daily routine that looked all too painful. On day 15, Davis Phinney crashed, severely bruising his hip and fracturing his wrist. Now it was time to quit, certainly. Phinney would not hear of it, and he got back on his bike. Exceeded the will to win. It was over now. And so Davis Phinney's number joined the long list of broken dreams in the Tour de France. Wasn't it only 1 month ago when Boulder's Davis Phinney was on top of it all in his world back in Colorado?
All right, Boulder fans, come on, join us out here in the streets. Let's celebrate the way we do it, Boulder, especially when Davis Phinney wins. Come on out, ladies and gentlemen.
Never appreciated it until I wrote it. And so, I mean, now here I am lamenting, you know, thinking back about all these memories, and I just wish I could think forward to tomorrow's race. That's really all I wish I want to do.
One day later in the Alps, there was another call for the ambulance. It was Eric. He had crashed during a descent and had struck his head. It was for all of us a frightening moment. Heiden was hallucinating, and he did not recognize his close friends. It was later discovered that Eric had suffered a mild concussion. There'd be a night in the hospital for observation, but he'd be all right. The race was over, though. It's not supposed to end like this. Not for Davis Finney, not for Eric Heiden. It's not supposed to slip away that quickly. Not when only minutes ago you were pitching in the World Series, playing in the Super Bowl. Trial in the Tour de France. Bernard Hinault has announced he will try to beat teammate Lamond here and now.
Because he's attacked me from the beginning of the Tour de France. He's never helped me once, and I don't feel confident at all with him. That's all.
Greg LeMond's friend and ally now exists for the American as the enemy. Hinault's hunched frame on the time trial platform. Is this truly LeMond's nemesis?
You know, you never know what can happen. I can crash flat, so I feel really strong. I don't think there should be any problem.
In his world of meditation and isolation, the Badger is perched to lay waste to LeMond and the Tour de France. There are but 2 men left to ride the time trial. As the yellow jersey, the American will ride last. Hinault precedes him on the course.
If Hinault has any hope of beating Lamond, he must do it here in his speciality. After all, Hinault has won 20 of these special time trials since he first rode the Tour in 1978. 3 minutes later, Greg LeMond enters the start house, and for the first time in his life, he's last to begin, because he leads the Tour de France. Hinault has the chance to give his answer. Can he beat LeMond by enough time to bring victory in Paris, or will his tour end here? One way or another, the individual time trial will tell us the truth. LeMond knows too, he sits on the brink of stardom or disaster. Hinault wants so much to win, he pushes himself to gain precious time. And on a difficult narrow bend, he almost crashes. But in any case, the delay, if not the crowd, will cost him a couple of valuable seconds. Last year, LeMond beat Hinault by just 5 seconds in the Tour's final time trial. He knows he can do it. And above all, he wants to prove, especially to the French, he's a worthy wearer of the Golden Fleece. Hinault fights like a wounded animal. His pride is hurt. And in his own garden, he wants desperately to show he's the best. Pedaling at 35 miles an hour, LeMond seems to be having trouble getting his rhythm. He adjusts his shoe position. By using all of the road, Hinault is as smooth as ever, spurred on by his threats to beat LeMond by perhaps a minute.
LeMond has crashed on a tight turn and is in a panic to get back on his bike. An aide from the team car runs to give him a legal push.
Did you hear about the crash? Yeah, did you hear anything else about it? Is there a new foot?
What crash?
Yeah, that's why
Greg's wife and mother were watching live French TV, which at the time was not covering Greg. Word that someone had crashed came over a walkie-talkie.
What? Crash.
LeMond was all right, but not everyone knew it.
Can't be, Greg. Can't be. Is there a crash with Greg? No! No, we can't. No.
But he's all right. He's all right.
What happened? Oh, what happened? What do you mean he's all right? What?
Crash between kilometer 30 and 40. He's all
But
right.
is he still riding?
LeMond had lost very few seconds in the crash, but the questions he could only answer. Was he injured? Had his paranoia finally gotten the better of him? Up ahead, Hinault Hinault continued to pedal away. And at the halfway point, the two were roughly even. LeMond has asked the team car for a wrench to adjust his brakes damaged in the fall. The brakes are now locking against his front tire. If he used a wrench himself, he would breach the rules, and the team car refuses. LeMond is asked to pull over and change bikes, but he continues to pedal. Hinault is closing in on the finish line, but first takes on a final climb. LeMond finally gives in and agrees to a bike change, losing more time. Is this now that nightmare LeMond had anticipated? Up ahead, Hinault is in his final sprint to the finish, along the very road where exactly 1 year ago, he was in the yellow jersey and almost lost the Tour in a bone-crushing collision with the pavement. But today, there would be no mishap for the Badger. And at the line, he caught the rider who had started 3 minutes ahead of him. Hinault had set the day's fastest time. This tough, handsome Breton with the nerves of steel had turned in the race of his life. And the ultimate challenge to the man in the yellow jersey. The world would wait for Greg LeMond. Reports of the crash were already going out. Hinault had beaten his nearest competition by over 2 minutes. The world would wait and wonder about the fate of the American in yellow. His ride against all odds. Hinault had beaten him, but by only 25 seconds. The American would still be in yellow. His wife, Kathy, managed to burst through the crowd to find him. It was an emotional moment played out in the middle of an overpowering crush of reporters that eventually became too much for Greg to handle.
Laissez-le respirer, appuie-toi là.
The standings after 21 days. Bernard Hinault, 2 minutes 18 seconds behind LeMond, after one of the most emotional races in the history of the Tour de France bike race.
He's just killing himself to win this thing by himself with no help. And I don't know what to say. I just feel bad for him that he's all alone.
You would be hard-pressed to find a cyclist wearing the yellow jersey not wearing a smile this late in the Tour. LeMond was an angry young man indeed. The Tour is over. We won't fight each other anymore. Hinault's statement at the post-race news conference conceding the Tour de France to the American.
It's been a very bittersweet victory. I wish I could be. I think when I get to Champs-Élysées and it's over, I'll be happy. But it's hard to be happy right now. And there's so much pressure, so much tension in the air. It's been difficult.
Paris. The grand prize awaits Greg LeMond. I'm John Tesh along the Champs-Élysées. The race finished here about 1 hour ago, and wouldn't you know it, Greg LeMond at the beginning of it had some problems. Here's a look at what happened. Le Mans had crashed and asked his team vehicle for a bike change. The rest of the pack was wondering where was Greg LeMond. Well, LeMond was not hurt, and the yellow jersey got quickly back on his bike. It was Bernard Hinault, the man in the polka dot climber's jersey, the five-time winner of the Tour de France, who was able to lead Greg back up to the front and along the Champs-Élysées. 158 miles, and it was Hinault just behind the Maillot Jaune Le Mans 6 times around the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It began with 210 cyclists. Before it was all over, 40% had to abandon, to drop out of this great race. But when it was all over, it was Greg LeMond who finished here along the Champs-Élysées in yellow. The first American to win the Tour de France bike race. Andy Hampsten finished 4th. The best American on that 7-Eleven team, Bob Roll, 63rd place. Well, Greg LeMond just left us here. He had to go to a team meeting with the mayor. Here's what he said when we talked to him. Greg, congratulations. There was a time when we talked a few days back when you didn't think you'd be able to make it down the Champs-Élysées. There was so much turmoil. Are you still angry?
No, I've gotten over it, but there was so much tension in the air between me and Hinault, and it was only normal that I had that much. I mean, there were several times he wasn't quite frank with me, and I wish he would have told me what his plans were. And had he told me out in the open that he wanted to win the Tour, I would have approached the race completely different, and I wouldn't have been so nervous.
It looked to me like the French have finally accepted you as a true champion. The last few days there, we weren't hearing Hinault anymore. We were hearing Le Mans, Le Mans.
Yeah, because I think in the time trial, I proved that I really should have won the time trial without my crash on my bike change. And the time trial is really what we call the race of the truth. I mean, there's no team tactics. There's nothing involved. It's just the strongest guy wins. And it came at the end of the Tour de France when that's the truest test of all, at the end of the Tour de France.
Well, I want one last question. Truly, how excited are you about winning?
It hasn't even sunk in. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like combining World Series, Super Bowl, everything into one thing and winning it and not even, I mean, there's so much going on right now, so much press, so many people that I have to get back into my homeroom with my wife and sit back and think about it before I even realize what I've done.
It was great to see her unparalleled support of you, too, throughout the tour.
Yeah, well, she's my biggest supporter.
Congratulations again.
All right,
and good luck.
you.
We'll see you here next year. Back here live in Paris, and again, my congratulations to Greg LeMond. It's time to draw to a close my 4th Tour de France here on CBS Sports. There are a lot of marvelous people who worked very hard to bring you these shows, and I think they did a marvelous job. I embark on a new adventure now, leaving CBS Sports.